Thank you to everybody for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us for another great Cannabis Lab panel. And of course, we certainly appreciate you giving us your time. We have an amazing panel for you today. It is on labor and employment issues in the cannabis space. So for those of you looking for a job in the cannabis space, this is a great way to understand what companies are looking for and the challenges that they face when looking to hire you. And if you're in the cannabis space and looking to build out your company, again, another great panel for you to understand the challenges and the complexities when it comes to hiring people for a cannabis business. We have an amazing roster of panelists for you today, being anchored by Garrett Kamen from Fisher Phillips, J.R. Rappetti from Blaze Staffing, Rhonda Sheffield from TrueLeave, Lisa McGlynn from Fisher Phillips, Carolyn Smith from Ianthus Grow Healthy, and Jocelyn Stratter from Curaleaf. So without any further, and folks, the next event that we have coming up after this one will be our industry social on the 23rd. And that, do I have a location for that? It will be the Industry Social and Fashion Show in Miami on the 23rd. If you want a location for that, go to joinclab.com or check us out on our Eventbrite page. The last thing I'll say is also watch our podcast, which is live on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, on LinkedIn at Canna Business Group, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Canna Business Group. And if you want to see the entire library of episodes, you can find those at youtube.com/Elevate Your Grind. Without any further ado, I will turn this over to our moderator, Garrett. Garrett, please take it away.
Thanks, Robert. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Garrett Kamen. I'm an attorney over at Fisher Phillips. I work with companies across the country doing their employment-related matters. I've personally worked over in the tobacco and beverage field for quite some time, and I'm really excited to be part of the cannabis industry these days. It's a fun, exciting place to be. Today, we're going to be covering a number of topics I know well, and I know our panelists know even better than I do. We're going to be focusing on the types of issues that companies often overlook when they're managing and supervising their employees and their talent. So to help me get that discussion underway, I'm going to do a little bit more introduction on our panelists. We have a flavor for what's going to be happening today. We got Jocelyn Stratter. She's an experienced human resource executive. She's passionate about aligning organizational culture and competencies to drive business strategy and to create high-performing, highly engaged teams. She's the VP of talent, and she leads the talent management and diversity and talent acquisition functions over at Curaleaf, and I hope I got some of that right. We got Carolyn Smith. She's a human resources business partner at Ianthus Capital Management. She supports Florida Grow Healthy retail market. And before that, she spent a decade in small business. And sort of with that experience and her HR experience and education together, it's really helped her put together a comprehensive understanding of how to integrate human resources and business strategies. Next up, we got Rhonda Sheffield. She's the Chief Human Resource Officer over at TrueLeave. She has 20 years of experience in the HR field. She's been serving in a number of executive and senior leadership positions over the years. If you take a look at her bio online, you're going to see a lot of companies you know quite well and positive. Next up, we got J.R. Rappetti. He's the head of business development over at Blaze Staffing and recruiting. He focuses exclusively on identifying highly qualified candidates who have sort of unique skill sets that can help the industry, the cannabis industry. He also holds the position of a managing director at Rowdy Capital Partners. Sorry, JR. It's an investment platform. It's focused solely on vertically integrated cultivation companies. Last up, we got my colleague, Lisa McGlynn. She works over with me at Fisher Phillips doing labor and employment issues. She specializes on those issues in the Southeast here in the US. So with that in mind, let's just sort of jump right in, start throwing around some questions at people and let them answering. So first up, I'm going to throw it over to you, Jocelyn. So tell me, what are some of the challenges you're facing these days when it comes to hiring qualified talent in the cannabis industry? And do you have any sort of plans in place that you're looking to, or any programs in place to try and find those people?
Awesome. Well, hi, everybody. Nice to see you. And hello to the attendees. I'm really happy to be here today. So I would sort of kick that one off by saying it depends, and there's a lot of different challenges. I'll maybe hit on a couple of my colleagues here can also add into those. I will qualify. I've been in the industry for just about 4 months, which I'm learning is actually a pretty good tenure in the cannabis industry. So I have learned a lot in that time. And I would say, between cultivation, operations, retail, sort of the field hiring, I think a few things I would hit on there. It's certainly a competitive labor market, as everybody knows right now across industries. So I think, when you're looking at hourly employees, we're having the same challenges as a lot of industries. That said, we also get inundated with a lot of candidates, right? There's a lot of people that are interested in being in the industry. So I think just volume of candidates tends to be one of our challenges. And then for those that are familiar with the industry, badging. So kind of the approval process, it's different in each state, and some are more rigorous, some are pretty challenging, and it can really slow down our time. So we may be able to have an offer out and accepted pretty quickly, but there might be a lag in time before that employee can actually begin. So at the hourly level, those are, I would say, the big challenges. And then at sort of the salary leadership level, I would share that I think even in my 4 months, I'm seeing sort of some of the stigma of the industry having really changed and become more positive. So much is happening within the industry, but we do get to points sometimes with candidates where they've, been really close to an offer, and then they talk to their family members, their friends, their community, and they may shy away and turn down that offer. So those are, I guess, a handful that I would share right now.
All right. And now one of the things I think you mentioned to me previously when we were chatting, you mentioned the Second Chance Initiative in hiring. So can you tell me something about that?
Absolutely. So Curaleaf's really been excited to talk about and share, and something we want to kind of encourage across the industry. But as many of you know, sort of social equity and the disparate impact on communities of color over many, many years through the war on drugs has really created a disparity. And so the company has set a goal to hire 10% of our hires for this year from that community that maybe has been adversely impacted. So we have a fantastic partner, Illinois Equity Staffing, that we've been working with to help us, little dog there, help us reach that goal, partner with nonprofits, expungement and sealing, and also legal entities that are helping candidates to get into the space. So we're working, especially in the states where we have more ability to do that, really actively to provide more opportunities to those that have been impacted by the war on drugs. So it's an exciting initiative, and we've just kicked it off this year and are excited to be making progress.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Now, JR, you have probably sort of a different take on what you do when it comes to looking for qualified talent. So tell us about what you're up to.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. This is I'm happy to be here. This is a great opportunity. So Blaze was founded through the partners at Rowdy Capital Partners and Genesis Global, which is a 20-year-old existing staffing and recruiting firm that's based in South Florida. And what we are tackling right now is, as states opened up, primarily east of the Rockies, we are moving that talent from the West Coast with the decades of experience in cultivation in the states that have been around there, and transferring those employees over to the East Coast and operations that are coming online. Cultivation, master cultivators, that's a tough find. It's very hard to find someone with 10,000 square feet of cultivation experience and a solid genetic library, and then moving that individual into, let's say, a 50,000 plus square foot facility, which we see these new facilities at that size coming online. So it's a very cool area to be in. You get to meet a lot of interesting individuals. And Blaze is really structured to take the challenges of searching, screening, verifying, and onboarding talent to cannabis plant touching companies.
So once we get those people in the doors, we need to start looking over them. So we got to figure out what they're up to. So Carolyn, so tell me, what do you think? Do managers have an understanding of what we need to do once we bring those people in? So for example, wage and hour laws. I know that's one I see a lot these days. Do they know how to accurately record time and oversee these type of issues?
Hi, thanks for having me. I think it kind of varies across the board with our managers. It really depends upon their management experience outside and coming in, but we don't take any chances. We make sure we retain it in-house, actually through the HR. We configure the proper exemptions, non-exempt, exempt within our HRIS system. So there is no question. We have a great payroll team that is quite meticulous because there are so many entities across the nation that they alleviate those questions by kind of holding it within our own group. So our managers might not necessarily understand the wage and hour laws per se, but they understand proper payroll documentation and tracking those hours. So the system is put in there so they can't trip up too much, but they know enough to ask those questions.
So it's fair to say that managers, we don't always know what they're up to. So you guys rely heavily on your HR folks, your accounting folks to help you out. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. And payroll, our team encompasses payroll. Yeah. And so we do rely quite a bit and we get input on it when creating new job recs. We make sure that those are defined with regard to exemption level. But each area manager is responsible for, their own labor reports that are also put out each week. So looking at those, they'll have to make sure that they're each person is in the right place accordingly.
Well, and so as we have companies that are in the industry growing, it sounds like they need to make sure that they're aware of these issues and they're pitching it to people that are in the know because they're easy places to make missteps, right? So Lisa, I think you've done a fair bit of this type of work over the years. What are some of the issues people, you see when people fail to accurately record their time? Managers are letting people work overtime without recording it. What are some of the issues you see?
Yeah, and this is definitely one of the areas I always like to stress with the cannabis industry, because this is such an easy area to go wrong without meaning to, because the Fair Labor Standards Act is super confusing. It's complex. It doesn't always make a huge amount of sense. And I think people can feel as though they're doing everything right and so inadvertently make some mistakes. So the number one thing that we recommend is, making sure that people are accurately recording their time. And there's no right definite way to do it. You don't have to definitely clock in, clock out. That's a great way if that's works for your company. But they can be writing it on a piece of paper, anything, as long as it's accurate. So one thing to look back on, if all of your employees are clocking in at 9, clocking out at 5 every day for weeks, those probably aren't accurate. They're probably clocking in, clocking out, and when they're supposed to get there and supposed to leave. But usually there's going to be some variations. So even if you're thinking, oh yeah, we're good, we always do it properly, take a look at that. You want to do an internal audit before someone comes knocking on your door for an official audit. And we do see cases growing right now with the cannabis industry. There was one that made the news just a few years ago where there was a security guards working at cultivators providing security. And they claimed that they were classified as exempt, which means they wouldn't be entitled to overtime, but that they really were not exempt. They should have been getting overtime and they weren't recording their time. And the company actually made the argument that the FLSA shouldn't control over the cannabis industry because if it's illegal under federal law to have cannabis, it would be, they didn't have to follow these other laws. The court struck that down pretty quickly and really held that, yep, it's going to be a tight line for the cannabis industry on these issues, just like it is for everyone. And the risks for not getting it right, even inadvertently, even if you think you're doing everything right, would be whatever that person would have earned for unpaid overtime, double that plus attorney's fees for your attorney and for that person's attorney. And I also like to clarify that if you don't have accurate records, maybe they only worked 1 hour of overtime that they weren't paid for. They might claim they worked 200 hours of overtime that they weren't paid for. And if you don't have accurate records, the burden's going to be on you to really show that, no, that wasn't right. So this is my little fear-mongering portion of the presentation, I guess. But I do want to stress that there should be a flag going off in people's heads that they want to make sure that they are doing it right, so that you don't have to be one of these stories that we tell later about lawsuits.
I can tell you, just, you got to be careful. You just never know what's going to happen with an employee and a manager. That's why training's super important. So Rhonda, what can you tell us about that? What do you look to do when you're looking to provide training to managers and employees on HR levels? What are you looking to do to help minimize serious problems, like Lisa just mentioned?
So there are a couple of things. One is ensuring that you have a large category of training, and it's not a one size fits all. So it is important to understand the skill set of each individual manager, and then setting up just core training, but also specific training based upon the needs of that particular individual. So there are a couple of key areas that we look for in trying to ensure that we have consistent training across the board to management at all levels. So one of those is employee awareness. We want to, and this is a series of 8 actual trainings that just talks about awareness and emotional intelligence, things that a manager would need to be able to engage across all levels of the organization. The second is business essentials, and it's exactly as it sounds. It's ensuring that the manager is up to the challenge of thinking and being more cooperative and more productive. The third is employee excellence, kind of based upon our values and our principles. And the strategic point here is to set up and build an effective and an efficient workplace. And then, of course, you have those basic categories that all managers, you want to ensure that they're aware of and know. So you'll have your sexual harassment, your harassment and diversity, your health and safety, leadership and management, customer service, and good communication. So those are going to be provided across all levels. And then we also have some optional modules that managers can choose based upon the career path that they are choosing. So we do have central, then we have pathing that is specific to each manager based upon his or her needs.
Excellent. And let me ask, so now that you're in this world, we're living virtually. What are you finding? So you mentioned modules. Are we doing web training? Are we doing in person? What are the different ways you're finding, or is it a mix of it all? And what are you finding is most effective these days in this environment? Rhonda, throwing it back to you in case you heard me. Oh, you're on mute, aren't you?
So sorry, I wasn't sure if you were still asking me. Yeah, we actually do a hybrid. So we do have some web-based trainings, kind of the career pathing that I was talking about, where individuals can go in, their managers can choose courses they take. They can also choose courses themselves. And so that is web-based. But we also are doing, and have been doing for a couple of months, we are doing in-person delivery as well. So I think that for us, it's important, and it will continue to be important to do a hybrid of training.
Okay. And Carolyn, what's going on with you guys with training? What are you guys focusing on these days? How are you trying to accomplish risk mitigation?
Right. I love hearing what others are doing. It's so interesting, the different segments. We also have kind of started, since I came on board, it was kind of ad hoc, informal, trying to assess the needs of the managers. Again, kind of going back to the payroll piece, what do they know? They've got a lot of cannabis knowledge, but do they know how to train their employees? Do they know how to document? Do they know how to align with the policies in our manual? So as more and more of these ad hoc situations came up, the HR team identified the same focus and now we've developed these silos of these different weeks of policy, how-tos, HRIS, and have begun to roll those out to the managers. Kind of this hybrid as well, but usually in a format just such as this, we roll it out. We get a lot of Q&A back. We record it and make sure that it's available for kind of this moment, but also moving forward. Anybody's promoted, it moves really fast. So to make sure that we have those recordings up to date and available for anybody in this going into those roles is essential. Certainly when there's different policies, we would need to, when COVID was constantly changing, we would need to kind of revamp and regroup. Thankfully, HR has an open invitation to all the local manager meetings. So if there's some noise that's going on, they just say, hey, can you hop on next week? And we address it as a group, hopefully coming to resolution and clarity, but it changes hour by hour, day by day. So yeah, I like that approach of the different silos as well.
You know what I really heard, there was a phrase in there that you threw out that I think is interesting. I'm going to throw this around to Jocelyn and Ron to see what their thoughts are. You have a group that are passionate, right? Cultivators are passionate. This is a very passionate industry, but they're not always going to give the attention they need to give to HR issues, right? That who cares? I don't want to deal with that. That's that's the C-suite folk up there, the man. So how do you guys keep them focused? When that these individuals, they're passionate about what they do, and they're not so passionate or interested on HR issues. So tell me about that. Let's start over with Jocelyn.
Sure. So I think the training components that Carolyn and Rhonda spoke about are important. Sort of one additional aspect of that to try to get that interest level that Curaleaf had actually just done right when I came in was a positive employee relations training. So really sharing with certainly the HR teams, but also the managers to share, here's why having positive employee relations is important. Here's what we want to try to avoid. Here's what to do when we do see issues. Here's why taking care of them really quickly is key, and pulling in some of the legal and policy information into that. So I really like that. I think that's a great way to sort of get the engagement from the managers. And then I think, the other thing I've really seen as a best practice here is having HR really, whether it's in a facility, if it's large enough to warrant it, or certainly within that state or region. And, like in any industry, when the HR team is a business partner, when they are really familiar with the strategy and they're part of making that happen, then the business tends to go to the HR team to partner on issues and get in front of them. So I think, we're always going to have employee related issues, concerns, in any business where you have employees. So I do think the education, getting, people aligned, and then just being there as a really close business partner. I've also always found that, legal counsel, the in-house labor team is just priceless. They're fantastic. And, I think when there's an open line to that legal team, that always helps a lot too, so that you can have that immediate response when you need one.
And Rhonda, what do you think? Same issue. We got these passionate people, but may not be so interested in what we have to say. What are your thoughts?
I think Jocelyn hit it, the nail on the head, exactly what she was saying. In addition, some things that we've taken on recently is we've gone around, Jocelyn talked about the partnerships, which is important, being present in the moment. And we've also taken that a step further, and we've started having listening tours, and then taking the information that we gleaned from those listening tours and then holding managers accountable. And I think when you're holding managers accountable for an action plan of what has to occur, they're a little more likely to follow through and be present in the moment. So the listening tours have been extremely helpful for us.
I love that, Rhonda. I think it really gets that open door policy that you talk about. It shows people right there that, this is in place. Agreed. We did something somewhat similar, but like an HR roadshow, sharing some of the initiatives ahead, but also being there as that partner that can make sure that people know it's a resource to go to. Love that.
I like that. That's all really positive. Let's look at it from sort of more the negative way. What are we doing when we have more problematic issues, right? You guys are in the encouraging, what happens when we're having issues? What are we looking to do here? And I'll leave this open to anyone who wants to jump right in. I'm not sure who's the most comfortable.
With regard to HR issues, And when I'm having challenges, perhaps with at the manager level, is I find that instilling importance in HR issues works best when it comes from the top down. So I do my best to partner with fellow leaders in the field so they can continue to embody those policies. Always explaining the why, explaining why these policies, procedures, and initiatives are important. And if I'm able to bring them on board and embody it, then it just trickles down from there.
That's great. So we're a newer industry, right? We've been around a bit, but we're still a newer industry. Do you have any, I'll open this to the group. This might be more for Lisa, but I bet a bunch of you guys could weigh in. Do any of you have concerns that attorneys or governmental groups like the EEOC or the plaintiff's bar might view cannabis companies really as easy targets, right? You guys aren't often, you're not often there ready to defend yourselves against shakedowns, essentially. So Lisa, what do you think about that? Easy targets or no?
Well, I wouldn't say easy targets. I would say maybe certain groups might see new industries as easy targets. And I would also say just it always happens. Certain industries are more open to potential claims. One example I can give is if it's a sexual harassment case in an auto dealership, it's going to get more attention. People are going to pick up that case and bring that lawsuit because those are historically claims they can possibly find some background for. Likewise, technology industries and age-related claims, we often will see those getting a lot more attention. Garrett mentioned the EEOC, which is the federal agency tasked with looking into complaints of discrimination or harassment, so sexual harassment, age discrimination, race discrimination, all of that. And we do actually, there's recently the EEOC filed a lawsuit against a dispensary up in Maryland. And one thing that's different when the EEOC sues you is they put out public, press releases letting everyone know that they sued you. And if the case settles, they send out press releases letting everyone know how much money they recovered on behalf of these cases. And in that case against Maryland, a dispensary up in Maryland, it involved a sexual harassment case alleging that managers were touching people inappropriately, saying off-color remarks, things along those lines. I can tell you just because they brought the lawsuit, just because it's settled, doesn't mean that there was any merits to it. But I can tell you, because it's public knowledge and they released it with press releases, that it ultimately settled for $175,000 pretty quickly after the lawsuit. And that's not including the attorney's fees that they paid for their own attorneys. So these are cases that are definitely ripe out there. And I would say sometimes with newer industries too, it kind of piggybacks off the last conversation, managers who might not have been managers for a long period of time, I hear it all the time, they're just joking around, or, the company is just like a family members to them. And candidly, it's believable that people might say things that, sound a lot funnier in their head than they do talking to me or talking to a jury. And so really stressing, to lower level managers, especially, that they shouldn't be engaging in certain behaviors. Even if 99 people out of 100 thinks it's funny, that one person might sue you, and it's still not going to look good to a jury that it did in fact happen, even if it was just a joke. So I would say it definitely is an area where we're seeing a lot more attention from the EEOC and from plaintiffs' attorneys as well, unfortunately.
And Rhonda, what do you think? I saw you nodding along. Oh, you're on mute, my friend.
No, just nodding in agreement with everything that Lisa said. I'm not sure that I can add any additional flavor to that because, yeah, I think that she said it perfectly. So yeah, I was nodding in agreement.
Got it. All right. I don't know. Does anyone else want to chat about sort of what they're seeing now from outside the company? We've been talking a lot about internal risk, but has anyone seen outside risk from, the attorneys out there, right? This room has a lot of attorneys probably sitting in who are probably interested to hear, what you guys are looking to do to defend yourselves. Have you guys had any experience with that or not yet? I know a few of you guys are newer companies. Maybe it hasn't happened just yet. Not just yet. That's great to hear. Hopefully it won't be anytime so soon. So, all right, let's change gears from there. Let's go take a look at formal performance reviews. I know they can be pretty controversial among HR professionals. A lot of debate back and forth how you want to do it. Let's go around the room, just hear what are people's positions on formal performance reviews within this particular industry. Let's hear about it. So who wants to raise their hand and go first? Should I throw it over to Carolyn? Oh, Rhonda wants to jump in
It's
first.
okay. No, Carolyn can go.
No, Rhonda, you had your hand up. We're going to go around. Everyone's getting the shake.
So I am a fan of performance reviews. I'm not a fan of year-end performance reviews. I'm a fan of continuous conversation. So for me, it's ensuring that employees are looking at two things. So it's important to look at how they're performing, but it's also important for us to focus on where they want to go with the company. And so these continuous conversations should be a component of looking at both of those. So the career pathing, what do I need to do to get to this next level, but also how I'm currently performing in my current role. Also, this conversation should consist of putting stretch opportunities in place, creating opportunities for individuals to learn new skill sets, cross-training a variety of things. So yes, I'm a fan of performance management across the board, meaning that we're looking at the now and we're awarding people in the moment.
And Carolyn, are you implementing a different solution? How are you guys handling it?
Well, right now we still have the formal annual review, and I think it is a good benchmark with regard to merit and compensation, just to kind of a good pulse point throughout the year. However, given the demographics of the workforce, really with performance reviews annually, it really misses the mark on the objectives. So it's same with Rhonda, the constant feedback. We're building tools in place so our managers can really embody that frequent one-on-one touch bases, so they can continue to talk about development almost on a weekly basis. Certainly with our more juvenile workforce, newer into the industry, working on that 30, 60, 90 piece as well. But I think the hybrid, which seems to be the word of the day, the hybrid of those is what's going to be helpful to retain the demographic that we are currently employing in the industry.
And Jocelyn, what do you think? What are you guys looking at over there?
Absolutely. I'll echo those 2 points. I agree. I think having a formal process in place is healthy and make sure that, some of those touch points out of the year do happen. But yeah, giving regular feedback is absolutely something that the team members desire. The industry and the work is just happening so fast that even, twice per year isn't enough. I've been really fortunate when I came in. We were mid-pilot with a system called 15.5. So I so far have become a huge fan of it. We'll be launching in the summer. And it's basically a performance management check-in engagement tool. And sort of the idea is, a team member would spend 15 minutes per week putting together some information. Manager can take 5 minutes, but it's used for sort of a weekly one-on-one with a manager. There's also basically a weekly pulse check. So, as administrator, I get to see how that pulse is going in the company, how people are feeling like they're tracking toward their goals. We will ultimately use it for a true performance management tool. They utilize the OKRs, the objectives and key results. So be looking forward to sort of build that in. And then it has an engagement survey tool too that we haven't taken advantage of quite yet since we're just in pilot. But huge fan of, shameless plug here because I really am a big fan of the system. But I also think it's helpful because there is an app. It's a really simple, easy kind of way to communicate. And I think, over the last decade and, the folks here will probably agree. We've all been, I think, trying to figure out what do we do to move away from that really formal, rigorous, tiring process that nobody wants to do each year, but still get the results that we're after. I'll report back, next year after we launch to the whole company, but I really like that as a tool. And I know there's some other ones out there, but yeah, the check-in, the weekly check-in's been really fun. And then there's also like a recognition component, high fives. So we're able to link those to the core values. Again, it's a pilot, so it's a little bit small still right now, but be able to recognize peers, supervisors for work in any given week, and then call out a core value that they demonstrated too. So that's been exciting to kind of see the momentum build there.
I mean, that's pretty innovative stuff going on over there. You're not hearing a lot of companies do things like that. I'll open up to the group. Has anyone else got something new and interesting that, innovative in this field that, others out here might not have heard about? Or does Jocelyn take the cake, in which case we can award her some brownie points?
I think that takes the cake. We're doing some stuff in-house in our internal intranet and building some systems there. But honestly, that sounds like fun.
I think we're all heading over to Curaleaf in a minute. I was interested as well. We'll have to pick. Well, we could do an entire roundtable, I think, just on what you raised. So good stuff over there. Man, so let's throw something over to JR. We haven't heard from you in a bit, JR. So I got a question for you, given what you're up to. So I know there are a lot of growing companies that really find it useful to use something called employers of record to handle a lot of the behind the scene duties. I know you guys are involved in that. So can you tell us about the types of services an employer of record can handle for this group?
Absolutely. So the employer of record services that we offer our clients are very helpful when it comes to moving into that multi-state level. We can handle payroll processing, really everything, the complete employment life cycle, onboarding, funding the payroll, offering employee benefits, filing taxes. If it comes to a termination, handling workers' comp insurance. So really letting our business owners and cultivators focus on their core business, which is growing, and really focusing on what they do best. But going back to your last point with employment, to tally how a cultivator is doing, that's something you could do every 8 to 12 weeks, depending if they're coming in with their own genetic clones or starting with seeds. When they take down a room, their yield is really, the yield of the plant is really how they're doing as an employee, excuse me. So some of our clients like to make sure that the cultivators are sharing their experience and skill sets with some of the management team, as well as some of the newer cultivators in the facilities. But the employer of record services that we offer is really a way to take the weight and stress off of our clients and bring that onto Blaze, which is backed by Genesis Global.
Excellent. Now, has anyone here had a chance to work with anything like an employer of record here on the panel, or not yet? Not yet.
Well,
so those are.
It's a great time to start.
All right. So employers of record, they can help you out, get you focused on what you really want to do. Offload some of those issues we've been talking about, timesheets. We've been talking about workers. We've been talking about timesheets and some of the other back end issues, payroll. So that's where you're looking for that type of information. So I want to go back to something that I see a lot of, and it makes the news a lot. And I guess I'm curious what people think here. Maybe Carolyn, you can kick it off for us. What makes a no harassment policy effective, right? We're talking about how do we protect ourselves? We may have lost your audio, Carolyn. You're not on mute, but you seem to have zonked out on us. You there? In the meantime, I'm going to throw it over to who would like to answer what makes a no harassment policy fun. Rhonda, you want to jump in there?
Sorry, guys, I have to jump off. I apologize. I have a 5 o'clock.
Not a problem. So let me throw it up to Lisa. Lisa, what do you think about no harassment policies? What makes one effective?
I'm very much in favor of no harassment policies, and I think that everyone should have those, especially in 2021. The case I mentioned a few minutes ago where the EEOC sued the cannabis company up in Maryland, that was actually a major part of the lawsuit, was the contention that company had no policy against discrimination. And they raise the issue that, oh, they don't even have a policy against discrimination. They don't take it seriously. It's not an issue for them. And I personally seen similar arguments in cases where people might have a policy against discrimination that is, very, very weak or generic, or maybe, leaves out certain protected categories. They don't, we don't want to discriminate against race or gender, but it's okay, nothing's in there about age or pregnancy or something like that. So having a detailed non-discrimination, zero tolerance policy can really be helpful to, at the very least, hold off on those kind of claims that we just don't care, that we don't take it seriously, that's not even on our radar. So just having that is important. And then following it. One really common situation I'll see, even if it's not true, an allegation we made that someone made a complaint and nothing was done about it. So if you have a policy that strictly prohibits discrimination, harassment, retaliation, you want to make sure that people know the steps to take, who they make that complaint to. Do they make it to HR? Do they make it to a low-level manager? If so, does that low-level manager know that sirens need to be going off in their head when someone makes certain complaints to them, even if they're at a bar or a restaurant after work? They're still a manager. They never take that manager hat off. And also say too that zero tolerance policy doesn't necessarily mean that anytime someone gets accused of something, you immediately fire them. It does mean that you definitely take every single complaint seriously. For someone in your company, that should be priority number one, to investigate it as quickly as possible and then make the decision about what we do. I mean, there are scenarios, one example I like to give is, there was someone at a copy machine, a person of a different gender walked behind them, brushed up against them. Was that sexual harassment, or was that just inadvertently brushing up against someone in a small space? There might not be much you can do if you don't believe there was more to it, other than just say, thank you for bringing this to us. We've addressed it. It should not happen again. If anything does happen or you feel retaliated against, come to me immediately. And maybe go back to the person who the complaint was against and just say, look, we don't think anything, you can't determine anything negative happened, that you violated our policy, but just so you're aware, here is our policy. And also please don't take, steps against anyone who made these policies, because retaliation would be looked at just as seriously as any kind of initial action that was taken. So have the policy, make sure your managers know about the policy, follow the policy, and circle back to the individual who made the complaint. If you do those things and you can document what you did, trust me, you're already doing better than a lot of companies out there to put yourself in a position where you never have to, face one of these lawsuits to begin with. But if you do, you have good defenses.
And so, Carolyn, it sounds like you're back
Yeah.
with us. So we heard a lot. We heard a lot just there about policies internally and about employees on employees. What else makes a no harassment policy effective, in your opinion?
Something that we really strive for is making sure we're applying that policy both internally and externally. So a lot of our associates are patient-facing here in Florida, and as situations escalate, we as a team, we have a committee that meets in order to take those issues that might fall under harassment, derogatory language. We take those just as seriously as we would take them in-house, because that's their work environment. They deal with those patients every day. So that helps us continue to establish the culture of anti-harassment is not tolerated from our patients or our customer experience, but also in-house. So the policy and the message is consistent.
I think that's great. I think that's great advice we're hearing from the two of you. Now, I don't want to go too deep into this because we could do an entire day on this, but I am seeing an uptick these days in labor peace requirements within the cannabis industry. I'd love to hear some high level thoughts on what we're doing about labor unions and how your business is handling them. And Jocelyn, I think you and I were chatting about that previously.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen, just a little of this since I've come in, but I've spoken with our in-house counsel. I think number one is the employee engagement. So really making sure that employees are certainly engaged generally, but also that they know that if they are concerned about, benefits or practices, pay, any of those things, that they understand that they are, encouraged to utilize their open door, bring it certainly to HR, but to anybody in the company. So we do think that's sort of a best practice to mitigate, but being prepared to respond and educate employees should they have questions, should they be thinking about unionizing, having a response plan in place and thinking about what that would look like should there start to be some union activity, having those labor peace agreements ready. And then I guess the only other thing I would, add is I think we in the cannabis industry really have an opportunity to partner together to, make sure that as an industry, we're not a target, and how can we have some best practices? How can we kind of stand up together so that we have good responses and it's not, one company does this and another does that, but that we're sort of a reputable industry when it comes to employment. So I think we'll have future opportunities. I think sharing, whether it's in panels or connecting and networking together so that we can sort of share those lessons learned and where we've seen some issues is a really healthy practice that you see in so many industries. I come from apparel retail, and it's certainly common practice to, go to a conference each year and you share best practices and, hey, here's what you do to avoid that. And I think, having groups like this really helps. So little things. And then, we probably will see some unionization. So again, to have that in-house counsel, I think is really valuable.
That's great. And I do think, I think everybody should keep their eye on this. I think we're not going to get too deep into it, but labor and the labor issues, they're coming. They're coming in all the markets. California is seeing it big time, and we're going to start seeing it nationwide, I think. So everyone keep an eye, especially during the Biden administration. One of the big changes over. So it's an important one I want people thinking about. So thank you for sharing that, Jocelyn. I think it's going to get the ball rolling, or at least people thinking about that issue going forward. So let me ask the group this, you all come from different walks of life. How has your job changed now that you're over in the cannabis industry? What's the thing that's different for you? And so JR, why don't you jump off for us real quick? What's the big difference for you?
Things have been moving faster lately. More states are opening up, it seems every week. So just keeping up with current regulation and also making sure no one benefits from a poorly placed candidate in an open hiring position. That's loss of time and money for the client. That's a loss of our time, and it's not good for the individual we place in that role. So it's really important to stay on top of trends and also speak with individuals in the industry. We have a lot of friends with Hubble County roots, and they really have a great understanding of not only how to successfully grow cannabis, but do it at scale and create a product that the end user wants. That's why we got into this business. It's beneficial. This plan is so beneficial for so many reasons. So just staying on top of all the movement and really focusing on moving that West Coast knowledge over to the East Coast. New York's going to be a great example. They're projecting 50 or 60,000 jobs to come online within the next year and a half. So the scale and size of the operations in New York they're going to be very large.
That's immense. It's my former hometown. It's exciting to see what they're doing out there. Carolyn, what about you? What's the big change for you now that you're in the cannabis industry? What's the big thing you're seeing?
Just one change. So many. The first is lack of precedence. Really, that's what I have found to be. There it goes again. Sorry if you could still hear me. My camera's freezing up. But there's no precedence for which to reflect back on. Like, what have we done in the past? Well, nobody has been in this industry for 10 years. So that's kind of number one. Number two would be kind of continuing to define the company culture. Trying to make sure that we're still embracing the fact that this is a new startup industry, but also trying to make sure we're doing it the right way. Would be those are the biggest things. Sorry for the technical difficulties there.
You're doing great. It's a flattering picture you froze on. I like it. So one of the things I liked I heard in there was precedent, and it's a matter of consistency. So Lisa, I mean, you're doing the labor and employment stuff. How important is you're facing a new situation to make those decisions, and why is it so important?
Yeah, that's actually, when I get the call on a Friday afternoon, oh, can we fire this person? What's one of the first questions I ask is, what have they done and how have you handled situations like that in the past? Because, consistency is almost always the key. You're not treating, two similar situations differently. And, one person might have something, unique about them. They just had a workers' comp claim or something that makes them a more likely person to bring a lawsuit. So not having had a bunch of those kind of situations in the past to call on can in some ways definitely be difficult. It's easier to look back and just keep doing what you have been doing. But on the other hand, it's a great opportunity. When you haven't done things in the past, you're not tied to a certain way. It just puts some pressure on you to make sure that you're really giving thoughtful decisions to everything that you do. Why are we treating this particular violation in this way? Or what could we be doing to counsel someone to help them grow versus, termination or suspension or something like that. So in some ways, it's definitely a more difficult position. But on the other hand, it's nice that you really do get to kind of craft where you go from here.
And it can be hard, right, guys? You have your best employee who you want to help out, and you create precedents for that great employee. And then what happens? Your worst employee engages the exact same behavior, and you now have to choose to treat them exactly the same when it comes to time off. Has anyone here encountered that situation, had to navigate that road?
On the daily. No. Yes, yeah. And this is where Lisa hit the nail on the head is we could come together as our HR team, flesh out the pros and cons based on our experience, of course, get our legal counsel, and then make the decision of policy and then go forward with that consistently, and then have that trickle down to managers. Yeah, we do that on the weekly, coming back with different topics that every day is, I don't know, how do we do this in the past? And well, that was 6 months ago.
And when you have an industry like this that's just on a rocket trajectory, it's tough, right? You have new managers that don't know what you did 6 months ago. So Jocelyn, what are the things you're looking to do to help maintain consistency, right? That's probably a big part of your job too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, Carolyn said it really well, as did Lisa, whether it's an employment issue or something to build culture, I think, your actions have to speak louder than your words. So it's certainly about having those policies and then making sure that the leadership is enacting all of those values. I would say that probably, our core values were something that were really developed, in late 2020. And I think being able to really live by them, share them, recognize team members, I think building that culture and that consistency around what type of behaviors are important and rewarded, that really, I think, helps a lot, especially to Carolyn's point, there is not a lot of precedent a lot of times. So, whereas in a lot of industries, you're going back on experience and you're able to stand by a decision that was made previously, because those maybe aren't in place. If you can look back at the values, and say, okay, this aligns with our values, then that's the right decision. So I think that's what I'd add there. And then I guess in terms of how my job's changed, similar. Very much so, a lot of meetings and calls. So I feel for Rhonda, because that's definitely, a week and a day is jumping on something else because there's something new to, consult on or give some support in. And then I think the other thing I would just add, and I'm sure for the attendees here, it's part of why they're here, is so much more networking even than I did, previously, having, I think TA and recruiters, we always do a certain level of networking, but it is amazing how, people within my network, friends of people within my network, they just want to get into the industry. And so, it's reaching out and just finding the time to help people understand maybe where their previous skill set and experience might fit into this industry, and kind of give them a leg up to understand the dynamics that are just changing all the time.
Some good stuff. I agree with that. A lot more networking. I think JR and Carolyn, what do you guys think about that? A lot more networking in this environment than in past practice?
It's definitely a community. It's a tight-knit community, even with how fast things are moving. So it's really interesting to meet everyone that's jumped into the industry over the last 10 years. Like Carolyn said, not too many people have been in the industry for 10 years. That experience really doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I would just add to that that networking is key. The education is also critical for myself, in that I didn't have a lick of cannabis knowledge coming in. And if you asked me this time last year, I would have probably laughed and said, what? No. But it's fascinating. And so but our employees know so much more. So it's this mutual exchange of education, with even just your in-house staff as well. But externally, yeah, the networking it's a whole new ballgame.
And I see our time's wrapping up, but I'm seeing a few questions that are repeating themselves that I think I'm going to throw out there. And I think Jocelyn may have touched on this earlier, but I'll open it up to anyone here that has experience in it. So I'm seeing here questions about, so for example, how does your company deal with federal cannabis felonies? I see another one here that's talking about hiring individuals who were formerly incarcerated or constituents of reentry. I do think we may have touched on this, but I just want to make sure, since I'm seeing those questions a few times. Jocelyn, this is what you were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the kind of short answer is it depends on the state, right? Since it's so regulated by state right now. Some states are quite strict and some are a little bit more lenient, but they all have their own badging process if it is a plant touching role. So it does sort of depend. But then, yeah, I mentioned our partnership with Illinois Equity Staffing. We've also got, there's so many great kind of nonprofits and companies that have started to come online. Another one I'll shout out is Mass Cultivated. They are a Massachusetts-based company. They've got a fellowship that they're sort of sponsoring right now. We're working with them. So, and then, I think there are a ton of networks out there for expungement and sealing of records. And I think it is a fantastic opportunity for cannabis companies to really partner in a really serious and meaningful way. I think I just saw someone chat into there. The Rooted in Good initiative that Curaleaf has is very much focused certainly on the social equity and kind of second chance piece of things, as well as making sure that minorities have an opportunity to enter the industry. So there's so many opportunities that will just help us, certainly from an employer branding standpoint, but also to get great people into the industry that have been really shut out of it previously.
And how about you, Carolyn? Is that something you've come across or not just yet?
Not just yet. I'm primarily focused here in Florida. And so we have, of course, as Jocelyn refers to it as badging, the back check procedure right now limits us in those areas. However, we do nonprofit wise have quite a large reach for the Last Prisoners Project, where we collect donations and do letter writing campaigns with regard to those that have been incarcerated for cannabis related offenses. But yeah, we're kind of limited a little bit in Florida, but I really am enjoying hearing about these other initiatives that are embraced at Curaleaf.
All
I
right.
think I'd, also just talk about trying to get some of these regulations changed, right, statewide and certainly federally as we watch what happens there. But, I think anything we can do as an industry, as employers to help change, some of those really tough regulations will make a big difference.
Well, I think we're coming up, Robert, we're coming up on the hour mark. I think that's about what we're looking to do today. So I want to thank everyone for all of their thoughts and help today. I want to thank Robert for inviting us. I think we had an exciting discussion today. And I just want to thank everyone for their help. And I hope this was informative. Again, I'm Garrett Kamen, and I'm happy to have moderated for you today.
Thanks for bringing us together, Garrett.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank
Cheers.
you.